You are recording. Hey. So we have all of us. Hi. Welcome to my first attempt at a podcast video chat during a pandemic situation here. We're talking to Lindsay Daniels, who is an amazing director and creative director and motion designer. Do you have any other titles you tend to market yourself by?
No, I think you covered it, Goldie.
Okay. So Lindsay and I met years and years ago. We met technically through Craigslist because I was looking for an office to share and ended up sharing an office with you and an interior designer. And just by a fluke ended up with someone else who worked in the industry sharing a space. So we worked together on a lot of projects for a while we shared a space. So we were initially going to talk about title design, and we will talk about title design. But we started talking about how the pandemic has affected our industry. So figured we might as well go ahead and record that conversation, since I'm sure a lot of people are having this conversation right now.
Yeah, it's been it's just a huge impact on so many levels. But what Goldie and I were talking about is this notion that I think just given like what our roles are in what we do in the motion design industry and how we've set up our businesses and our kind of individual kind of skill sets, like we're working remotely has been part of our kind of approach since we met, right? Like it was kind of
Mhm.
like, what that was like 8 or 9 years ago. And we were sitting in a shared space because we both felt, or at least I felt at that time, where I was like, I need to be able to function and work outside of my home. The idea of waking up, having a commute, the ritual of getting ready for work was part of the mental mindset that I needed to get into a professional space. And I think that was because I, came from working in New York where like the bustle was just crazy. And then when I moved back to Seattle, it was a different kind of bustle, but I felt more connected to kind of the freelance world and the kind of notion that despite where I lived, I would be able to and wanted to work on anything, right? Like anything
Mhm.
that was like any opportunity out there. I didn't want the fact that I loved living in the Northwest, and that is where my best creative self is here. I don't know, I think people um, become their best creative selves. I think environment is a huge part of that. And so like for me, I was like, okay, well, the Northwest is where I like as a human feel best. And but I still wanted to like have that, connection to the best work and to amazing projects and work with amazing people all the time. So the freelance world seemed to connect with that and resonate with that. But then I was like, well, I can't work from my house. And so we both kind of went to great lengths to have our studios in it was an amazing building and an amazing space. And I loved going there every day. Um,
Well, we also had awesome roommates, so that helped.
yeah, totally. But it's like, I mean, like, the people who you share your space with and are around all the time, it matters, right? It impacts your
Mhm.
mental zone, I guess. But yeah, I think it was probably like 3 years ago when I ended up building my own office space in our home and
Mhm.
was working on highly collaborative projects with teams of people where the editors would be in New York, my motion designers were in Chicago, my client and kind of best collaborator and the business I was working for was in Louisville, Kentucky. And like we just like somehow managed, you know, my client was like so committed to building the right team for her projects.
Mhm.
And she was in Louisville, Kentucky, and she knew that maybe the exact person that she needed to animate these enormous assignments wasn't going to be there on site with her. And she was just like, we're going to figure this out. And like, we kind of built this fantastic team all over the United States. And we just started like finding these tools and working remotely. And with Slack and Frame.io and Zoom and Skype, whatever it is, we figured out these really great processes. And since then, like, I found it unnecessary to go into the office because I was connecting like this to people, and I felt incredibly connected to my team because I saw their faces every day, and we were like, in it, in the thick of really crazy things together. And so, in this, like, working in this pandemic and this craziness right now, this world around us right now, my workflow hasn't really modified any, because it's just how I've been working for years. And I think there's, things that are different about it, but like, I don't know, like, I feel really lucky in many ways that there's a lot of processes that haven't changed. Obviously, we can't go on set and shoot anything right now, which for me is so sad. Like, I love being on set so much. And yes, you do too. But
Yeah. Well, we're kind of unusual in that we work both as directors on set of live action shoots and also do a lot of motion stuff. And in the post-production world too. Like, when this started happening, I had 3 shoots get canceled all in the same week. But then I got a huge influx of animation projects. So one thing completely dried up, but the other thing kind of flourished in this, like, oh, we still need videos, but we can't gather a group of people together on set to shoot, so we'll go this other route with it. And yeah, same for me as far as the day-to-day. I've worked from home off and on for probably a decade at least. I've had offices periodically, especially when I had employees, and when I was having contractors, subcontractors come in and work on projects with me on a regular basis, it was nice to have a space that wasn't my kitchen or my living room, to have people come work on a project with me. Because it got to that point when I was working at home in Seattle, I had 5 contractors in working on projects with me, and like, people are sitting on the floor and like at my kitchen counter standing, and like, my desk is, and it's just like, this isn't gonna work anymore. Like, I've expanded beyond what my living room office can handle. But then I've kind of contracted the other way and like really pushed the boundaries of remote working, because I spent 2018 traveling around the world and just working remotely from wherever I happened to be. And that was no problem at all. Like, I had no issues traveling for 8 months internationally and keeping in contact with my clients and the people that I was collaborating with. So remote working in this day and age is really not that much of a hardship, really.
I think what it is I think it just takes, I think it's more of a mental state, honestly, because I think, there's things that I've learned, now that I don't have that. I mean, I have a separation of work and home in the sense that I have a office space that I very much like define as a mental workspace. But it's that notion that as an individual, you have to treat your work time with respect, and have those boundaries between it. And if you have a commitment to your client or a deadline or a schedule, like, that is your absolute responsibility and professional duty to to do that and make yourself available, and have those kind of those boundaries between your time. At least, like, that's what works for me. Like, it's like, still, going through those routines of waking up, taking a shower, getting dressed, like, you just having those distinctions of what defines a work day versus personal day.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that definitely made the biggest difference for me as far as kind of creating work-life balance when you work from home is not checking my work email after 6 p.m. Like, I'm just not gonna do it. The day is done. I'm not responding to any like fire drills at the end of the day. It's just not happening. It's shifted a little bit now that I'm in New York and most of my clients are still in Seattle. my office hours are still running parallel to your time zone because you're still in Seattle. And it actually is kind of great for me because I'm not a morning person. So 9 a.m. when everyone gets into the office, I'm at noon, and that's just perfect for me.
That's so funny because that's one of the main things that's shifted for me during this pandemic time is that in order for me to kind of function as a professional, as a myself and as a mother, I've had to shift my work schedule significantly. So I'm basically at my desk starting at 5 a.m. so that I can work because most of my clients are on the East Coast. So it actually works out kind of well. So I'm pretty much doing the complete opposite of you. But it's great because I have a quiet home between the hours of 5 a.m. and 8-ish, and so yeah, so we're kind of modifying and working like that to just maximize the hours in the day, and it's exhausting, but it's actually I feel like it's so interesting because there's these things that we're kind of pushed into right now, whereas maybe it's for you and I, the process of working on having calls on with a video conference and communicating on your day-to-day with Slack or whatever program it is, and having these processes not being very disrupted. Like the approach of my life is incredibly different because honestly, mainly because the management of homeschooling two young kids, with the support of my husband for sure, because we're just like, trading off, but it's, that's kind of been the schedule shift, and the management of time is very different right now for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge challenge that I don't have. Trying to, especially what you just mentioned before we started recording, they just yesterday announced that school is closed for the rest of the year. So you have the entire months of homeschooling ahead of you, not just a potential 2-week closure or whatever it had initially been.
Yeah, so when we first got the announcement from the Seattle public school system that the schools were going to be canceled, they kind of our governor was pretty progressive and closed the schools for 6 weeks, like right off the bat. So, and in many ways, I was thankful for that, as challenging as that was to hear, because then it kind of got us in the mindset that this isn't a 2 weeks. You can kind of wing it a little bit. You can be like, okay, we're gonna try to manage things a little bit more piecemeal. But when we got that announcement, I was really tried to shift the way that rooms functioned in our home, that how we were going to approach schedule, and kind of go at it from a longer term perspective, because I think that was going to be better for our mental sanity, is that this is more a long-term solution. But the difference of 6 weeks to really what we're looking at is, beginning of September now, where, and I don't know what the summer is going to hold, but it's, I don't know. It's a different way to approach your life. And we haven't figured out, we know that it's, what we're doing right now is working on some levels and isn't working on others. And, I think we'll just constantly modify and give ourselves a sense of grace, because everyone kind of needs that right now. But it's, I think everyone has their own set of really real challenges right now. And yeah.
This has got to be a bigger shift for your husband, because he's used to being at his company in the office surrounded by his employees, right? So how is he handling the shift? How is his company modifying?
Yeah, so my husband owns a graphic design, motion graphic design studio. So we're kind of both in the same, we're all kind of in the same industry. And I think the difference of being a business owner with employees and is a completely different, a set of challenges and stresses. But I think, from a functionality of like how it's like working in our home, um, I think because I take the morning hours, like he gets the afternoon, and like I'll manage that from a parenting standpoint. So
Mhm.
yeah, his day is wildly different, but they're, essentially utilizing the same tools that we're utilizing, but just on a more management, like there's just more to manage. And because their graphics, I mean, they do have like live action jobs, just like you were saying, that just like disappeared.
Yeah.
But they also have a huge capacity and knowledge of motion graphics and working remotely. And so like there's a lot of business that has still remained, like you were saying, like in that facet of the industry. And so thankful for that, right? Like very thankful for that.
So
And
the key to
yeah,
surviving the pandemic is to have a broad set of skills.
for sure. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. It was interesting watching kind of the ripple effect of the pandemic across our industry, just watching all the people that I know on Facebook, especially video production companies that specialize in production. Like they don't do a lot of post production, they don't do animation in house. And just the panic that kind of hit everybody when, early March, just like dominoes, every production shut down right away. Like I had 3 shoots get canceled, you had shoots get canceled. But it was interesting to watch people. You could see certain companies just pivoting on a dime to like, okay, we're doing live streaming now. We're going to work with event companies to turn events into virtual events, because the event industry got hit really hard right off the bat too. Like that, those seem to be like really the first people that got knocked down by this. Was events that just got canceled, productions got canceled, the production teams that film events, like they just got wiped out. It was all just like all at once right at the beginning of this industry. Production got hit really hard.
Well, and you can see like what I found kind of not, I mean, it's interesting to see how many. So it used to be like graphics, there was like, videos, and they would be for broadcast, or they would be for a television show, and there would be like very definitive like facets that motion designers were integrated in from, a production standpoint, a post-production standpoint. I guess the deliverable was more contained, or the client was more contained. And now it's like there's so much need for video content that you'd see, for example, a client where the final video would be for an event, or the final video would be for a launch of a film, or the final video would be for, something that it's not that they didn't, the project got canceled because of something. I don't know. It's like that the project was canceled because it was for something that was canceled. And so
Right.
you like started to see like how deep all of like just the core of the ripple being like so deep in there. And
And how many industries are so interconnected to each other.
right, right. And I love the kind of the problem solving that has started to emerge from this, and like the quick pivot that, yeah, we can't meet in person, but let's, you know I was working with a company who had to, like they were doing work for upfront stuff, and so it's like that quickly went from a live thing to an online thing, and they just like
Right.
had to, and that's the challenge too, is that all of these amazing designers and production producers and animators like are also managing the kind of fallout in their personal life, whatever that means. And then there's also these like intense shifts in projects to pivot and rework the complete approach, while also, if they're not used to working remotely, like developing a new stream of work. I think those are really like, those are enormous things. Uh, they're huge stressors and huge things that like our industry really had to work through very quickly. And
Well, our industry has always one that's has always been one that's changed a lot. Like you and I have been doing this for a while, and we've seen a lot of changes in the industry. Like, I mean, the technology has changed so much. The channels that our work goes out on has changed so much. I mean, when I started, and I'm gonna like really age myself right here, there really wasn't video online. Like the concept of having apps, let alone first run videos that play when you first launch an app, like none of this stuff existed when I started in the industry. Broadcast was so much more of a huge part of the industry than it is now, and now web online content is the vast majority of the work. The technology is always changing. You're constantly having to adapt to updates in the software and into the technology that you're using and where your content's going to live. I feel like people who survive in this industry have to be really adaptable. So I see that adaptability being really helpful in this kind of a situation.
That's a good point, that we're like this is like we're used to that
Things change,
necessity.
constant shifting.
That's right.
So do you have any predictions on how the industry is going to be permanently changed once we come out of the pandemic? Is work remotely the new norm? Is that just going to stay more of a constant in the industry? Do you think people are going to be really excited to go back to working in shared spaces and offices? And
It's hard to tell. I hope it's a bit of a combination, honestly. I think that there's so much benefit in person to person collaboration, especially in the creative world. I think that I think people will be thankful to be able to go back to an office, but I also think that it will open this new workflow, a comfort level with this new workflow, and a trust that it can work.
mm-hmm.
That will kind of enable different employees to live a lifestyle that maybe they would work better for them. I don't know. So I hope that there's more trust with that.
I do have to say on this pandemic topic, the thing that's been a big bummer for me personally is that I had a short film out for consideration, a bunch of festivals, and they just all got canceled. So that film is just out in the ether now, which is unfortunate. But
I saw something that I found encouraging, and I love how different companies are stepping up and supporting the arts community, and how many people are kind of opening, or just there's such a need right now for art and stories and music, and that it brings so many people like a sense of calm or optimism that maybe they're missing or needing. But it's like, for example, I saw that Prime Video is, supporting the South by Southwest films, and like they're putting it all online, or like they're streaming it. And it's like these, companies that have these enormous platforms to get things out into the world are supporting artists in really fantastic ways. And I hope that continues, right? Like, what an amazing thing for those artists who have the films in there, or that they have this access now to an audience that's far larger than what they would have had before. And that, that those stories can, hopefully next year they say, oh, wow, like that was a really fantastic way for us to very easily support a community and individuals that need that kind of support and exposure to make the next step in their, careers and path. And so good for them, right? Like that kind of support makes me so happy that, that it's out there.
I think we're definitely going to see a lot of the smaller festivals not come back from this. I know with South by Southwest and some of the bigger festivals, even with the bigger festivals, there was concern that if they didn't have a festival this year, they may not have the funds to do it next year. But there will be festivals that will survive, and I think we will see more of an emergence of online virtual festivals and more streaming of independent films. So it's kind of a give and take. There are pros and cons, and innovation comes out of challenges, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your pandemic experience with me.
Yeah, totally. It's